You're listening to the AmWritingFantasy Podcast. In today's publishing landscape, you can reach fans all over the world. Query letters are a thing of the past. You don't even need a literary agent. There is nothing standing in the way of making a living from writing. Join two best-selling authors who have self-published more than 20 books between them. Now, on to the show with your hosts, Autumn Burt and Jesper Schmidt.
Hello, I am Jesper.
And I'm Autumn.
This is episode 73 of the AmWritingFantasy Podcast. And the topic of today's episode is opening hooks. So I guess we need to have something clever to say here as well, Autumn, like an opening hook for this episode.
Oh, shoot. I've never been good at just coming up with a great opener on the fly. I'm not a stage show actress.
No, and I got distracted because when our intro narrator there is saying the intro, I got distracted because I was thinking about recently we got a transcription service to do transcripps of every single podcast episode,
which is excellent.
But I got distracted because every time he now says my name in that intro, I can't help thinking about how the AI is going to get it wrong because I edited and uploaded all the past transcripts of all the past episodes over the last week or something, or at least half of the past episodes.
I gotta get my half
the other half. Yeah,
but
I did half of them.
Yeah,
but every single time the AI comes up with a new variation of how to do my name.
That's what's amazing is it's different every time. It's the closest I've seen it. He does a Jesper with a Y, which I thought, okay, that's pretty close. But one time it was, hey, dude. I was like, what?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's so weird. So I got distracted about that while I was listening to him.
You were paying attention because you were like, what's it going to say about my name now? I mean, it always spells mine incorrectly in lowercase. And I was just like, well.
Yeah, and then also Bert with an E every time instead of an I.
Yes, I always, at least at least it comes out a little bit closer than yours. But yeah, I wish we could train it to at least get our names right. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so anyway, how are things?
Things are going good. I'm slowly starting to enjoy the cabin now that the major construction's done. I won't say we're not doing anything, but we're on finish work. So today I painted the door. It was very exciting. We were building, whole rooms, and I had to paint a door, so it was so easy. And it was a gorgeous day. We've had beautiful weather in the 60s if you're on the Fahrenheit. So yeah, the 20s in Celsius. So it's quite lovely, nice weather. And I'm getting myself finally organized. A long time ago, I took a leadership course, and it's funny how many times I actually refer back to this course. It was an 18-month course. I've even written blog posts because I learned so quickly that if you put 13 would-be leaders in a room together, you on a quest group, you have 13 people who want to go on a quest together, it does not work out well. You can't have 13 different heads and one body. But no. One of the things I learned was time management, and I finally, now that I have this mental and physical space to do something other than build an entire building that I'm living in a quarantine pandemic, I've started doing some time management, and I got out my book, and one of my favorite things was writing down your to-do list, not just like a massive to-do list, but based on your roles. So I broke up all my to-dos into am writing fantasy or writing or graphic design, and then I have little things under each of them. So that way you keep everything going, because you're not just this massive list. You want to make sure you get at least something done on everything. And I even have stretch goals. The only thing I didn't put in was relax goals. I think maybe I want to work on a relax goal or a me time. I should add a me goal.
Yeah.
But
and how about rewards for yourself when you get things done?
That's to me checking it off. I'm such a task words in person. Isn't that horrible?
No, I'm very similar. I just love it when I can click done on something. Then it's just like, yes.
We're both so sad that way, but we get a lot done. So yeah, my reward is crossing things off, and usually the stretch goal is something fun. Like right now, you and I were talking about doing trailers last week, and I put on my stretch goal is to finally get working on the trailer for my series. So that's my I really want to work on this, find time to work on this project, or maybe one afternoon where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna just push everything aside and say like, I'm doing this because I want to do this. So how are things? I know you had a house showing and you wouldn't tell me before the podcast how it went. So I'm dying of curiosity.
Well, yeah. So we had, as we talked about before, I mentioned before, we are in the process of trying to sell our house. It's not been easy, that's for sure.
The pandemic does not help, but...
Well, actually, that was the funny thing, because I talked to the real estate agent and he said, and get this, he said, it is insanely busy now, he said.
Really?
We're working like 70 hours a week, he said.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So I think it's because people just have more time on their hands now with the pandemic. So they're doing their house shopping now and looking on the internet and say, oh, let's go and look at that house and this house. And
or maybe they're sitting at their own house going, I hate this place, let's sell it and get something else.
No, maybe it's just been, they've been talking about moving for quite a while, and then they think, okay, let's do it now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they're pretty busy. So we had one showing, 1.5, 2 weeks back?
Yeah.
With, it was like slightly, younger couple. Oh, I sound so old when I say that.
Don't say that. I'm older than you by a couple years, so that's not funny.
Yeah, no. Maybe like 10 years younger than us or something, I would say.
That's quite young.
They are pregnant with their first child, so I can sort of recognize ourselves 10 years ago. And they've been out house shopping, I think for a while, because it sounded like they came back. As I mentioned on a past episode, we dropped the price 100,000 Danish crowns recently, so that helped apparently. So they came back and they had a viewing like 1.5 weeks back, and then a couple of days later, the real estate agent called and said, can we get a second viewing? Because they would like to come back and see it again. So of course, yes, of course you can. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, they wanted to see another house on this street that the real estate agent also has for sale. So they wanted to see both of them because they wanted something to compare with. Mm-hmm. And they went and saw the other one is like 200,000 Danish crowns more expensive than ours. It's also slightly bigger. I think it has one more room or something than ours, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong on that, but nevertheless, they went there to get a bit of comparison or perspective. And they were supposed to come here something like 2:30 that day or something. And he called 20 minutes early and say, can we come over now? And I was like, what? Well, yeah, we'll be out of the house in 10 minutes, so then you can come. And I said to him, well, that was quick.
Yeah.
Weren't you supposed to spend at least half an hour over there or something? Yeah, they say, yeah, but they're not that interested in this house, so you just wanted to see it. So, okay. So they came over to ours, and then, of course, we were, of course, not here. Mm-hmm. So when I talked to the real estate agent afterwards, he said that the first thing that the lady there said when they entered the house or our house was just like, yeah, let's see what I mean. You're getting a much more house for your money here than the other one. It was one of the first things she said. So that was good.
Yeah.
And they had their mother with them. Or I don't know if it's the man or the woman's mother. I don't know, but one of the two. And she was also praising the house and saying, yeah, this is a really good price. You're getting a lot for your money here. Of course, we did also just drop the price as I mentioned, so I'm sure that helps. And they were basically just, as the real estate agent said, he said that they were just talking only about the things that they liked. I mean, there was no critical questions. There was nothing. They were just saying all the things that they like. So that was good.
Yeah.
They have an apartment inside Copenhagen, a 2-room apartment that they need to sell. So first, so here in Denmark, you can buy a house on condition that you sell your own first. So basically, you do all the papers and you basically sell the house, but no money is transferred until they have sold their apartment. And then there is a time limit on a contract like that. So that it'll expire at some point if they haven't sold within, normally it's like 6 months. So if they haven't sold their place in 6 months, then the contract is either you can extend it or you can basically rip it apart then and say, okay, that's it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and then the only way around that is still that, so if somebody comes while you sign the conditional contract, if somebody then comes and say, well, we would like to buy the house, and if they don't have any condition, they can actually buy it even though the other contract exists. So they basically override that contract and then they just buy it. And then the ones who were supposed to buy it or that signed a conditional contract, well, that's just bad luck.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it works here. So the real estate agent was he was supposed to talk to them over the weekend, but I haven't heard back from him today.
Jeez.
So now I don't know.
Don't know with what they're thinking. Oh no. Okay, well you can't make me wait until next Monday to find out what they're gonna do. If you find out this week, you have to let me know.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
But we'll see. I mean, all in all, it sounds like they're very positive. Their parents live down here in this same city here. So, and they live in Copenhagen, which is like 50 kilometers away. Mm-hmm. So now she's 6 months pregnant, the lady. So I'm sure that they want to get down here close to the parents, right?
Oh, very much so, I bet.
Yeah, and according to what they have told the real estate agent, they're not looking at any other houses or anything in this area. It's only our house that they're looking at. So it should really happen, I hope. But let's see. Let's see.
A week on the internet with the AmWritingFantasy Podcast.
All right, so Autumn, we doubled down over these past few weeks, and we actually put a short course together, didn't we?
We did. It was amazing that we've gone from, it seems like we have all these projects that we've been working on for ages, and we decided to throw another project in there and get it done in like 2 weeks. It was crazy.
I don't know what we're doing sometimes.
Other than making tasks that we can cross off.
Well, yeah, actually, now that you say that, maybe that was sort of like subconsciously, let's do something where we can tick off, because all the other projects we're having, like we have huge like world building course that, we're moving forward on that, but it's big. We have a free course that quite a lot of effort. We have a course on email list building, which is also a lot of effort. So there's so many things. So maybe it's just like subconscious play here saying, let's do something where we can get it done.
Exactly. I think it might have been just like, we want to win. So we did a win and it was awesome. So it was good. Yeah. So it turned out, I counted the minutes. So there's 86 minutes of guidance on the key methods to create fantastic characters in that course. It is 6 modules long until you decided to add a bonus module, Autumn. Then it became 7 modules long. I just thought it needed just a little bit more, but it wasn't enough for a whole nother module. So it's just a little short bonus.
Yeah. So basically it covers 8 character archetypes that every writer needs to know. We talk about understanding character motivation. We also discuss what comes first, plotting or character development. Mm-hmm. And there is guidelines on point of view characters. We go into character arcs and explain how those works. And then your bonus module, Autumn, it's about breathing life into characters.
Yes. So really bringing out their personality and making it, giving that little spice of life that sometimes all the character lists and interviews and sheets and bubble charts just seem to lack.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good stuff like there. So as I said, 86 minutes. So it's rather quick and easy to go through. So it's not like it won't demand hours and hours and hours from you to get those key methods and get those key learnings. It's quite easy and non-demanding.
Yeah,
and
it's a compact short course.
Yeah, compact. Yes, that's a good word. And it's also fairly cheap.
Yes. Because it is a short course, we decided to make this one. I mean, it came out as something out of the pandemic and quarantine to help writers. Our group voted on it. This is what they wanted to do. We had a special pre-registration discount, but even at full price, we are selling it for only $47 because it is a short course and because it is there, as part of something you can do now to keep your writing and advance your skills while you're sitting at home and waiting for the world to restart at some point soon, it sounds like.
Yeah, so the course is available right now, and I will put a link in the show notes from where you can get access to it. And there is also, as we always do, Autumn, we have a 30-day money-back guarantee. Right. And, it's very rare that anybody takes us up on those guarantees there, but it has happened once in a while, and when it does, we don't ask any questions. We just give you your refund, and that's it. Yes. Quite easy.
Very much.
And on to today's topic.
All right. Opening hooks.
That's right.
Pre-recording, we actually started debating a bit. What do we mean about opening hooks?
Well, I mean, as we were saying, there's opening hooks to the book, opening hooks to chapters. There's the opening hook to your blurb. Which hook are we hooking?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, but I think that is actually a good place to start, just defining a bit what are we talking about when we're saying opening hook.
Absolutely. So we decided after a brief, what are we talking about today on the podcast?
That we're so professional podcasters. It's amazing.
We can handle the stress. As our students, we just did a student Q&A before this as well, and we are good at answering questions on the fly. So you cannot push us off our perch of what we know what we're talking about, we swear. But we decided we're talking about the opening of books. So this hook is literally hooking readers so that when you have someone open up, say, like the sample, read a sample on Amazon to see what's inside, that basically you grab them so that, like, yeah, I'm buying this. I want to see what happens next. So that's the opening hook we're talking about for today.
Yeah, so it's things like when your story should take its beginning, it is how to capture a reader's attention, and I guess maybe we could also touch a bit upon how much detail you should include in the beginning.
Absolutely.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and if not,
all right.
As we were talking before, we actually have a booklet on novel beginnings and what should be in there. So if we don't quite cover everything, they can always go to the AmWritingFantasy website, and we'll have that in the show notes as well, and purchase the booklet. It's only a few dollars, and get anything that we might miss today, because podcasts, we're not going to try to do what we did last week, which was over an hour, because that was the book launch podcast, and it was huge because book launches are huge.
Yeah, it was more than I actually thought initially. It was just like there was so much to say there.
There is. We could have split into two, but I sometimes think it's good not to make people wait, get it all over with at once, and you have all the steps. Yeah.
So where do we start with this? Do you think what is the best place to start, Autumn?
Well, I think I always go with the cliches or the things that you hear thrown about, and I like to dissect them. And one of the things you hear when you're writing is start with action. And so that is true. That is a good hook, because you kind of grab the reader and take them with you as you're about to do something. The character should be doing something, but what does it actually mean to say start with action? And also, what does it not mean? And that's one of my favorites, because I do, especially teaching students, oh my goodness, I think over 50% of students start their first sentence with something about the weather. And it's that whole, it was a dark and stormy night. So starting with action is not starting with weather.
No, but it's tricky because starting with action is also not starting, because there's also the other way where you're starting with, let's say somebody's chasing somebody.
Right.
And when you start reading, you have no clue who's chasing who, why is it
the
important?
Character? Yeah, you don't even know which one are you supposed to care about, and where are you? There are so many questions right there.
It reminds me of that awesome scene in the movie Memento where he keeps forgetting. So he's running, and then he's like, he looks, I can't remember if he's looking behind. I think he's looking behind himself, yes. And then there's somebody running as well, and he's starting to speculate. Wait, am I chasing him or is he chasing me? And it's just so awesome. It's such an awesome scene. Then he turns around and the guy pulls a gun and shoots at him, and he's like, oh, okay, he's chasing me.
But it is true. I mean, as a reader, you are basically, we're talking about book one of a series or a standalone book. So we're going to talk about the opening hooks for something that is brand new. The reader doesn't know anything except if they took the time to read the blurb, which they probably did before either purchasing the book or opening it up to see what happens in that first page to see if it's interesting. And so, yeah, you're throwing a reader into a situation. And so, yes, what kind of action do you want to start with? The action where someone is a gunshot, or since we're talking about fantasy, magic, the dragon's about to eat them. Where do you want to start with action so that the reader is not overwhelmed going, I am so lost, I do not know what's happening? And I think one of the best ways of keeping things clear is maybe starting with action, but not having it as a chase scene, having it as a one character action. And I always like to keep it as something small. It could be as small as being purposeful, a drive to go somewhere. I know in mine is the character is looking for someone, my first book, Born of Water. So the action is she is sneaking out of a place so that she can go find something. It's very simple. One character, something is going on. It's kind of building the curiosity. And I think that's really going to be the key that we talk about today, is all you want to do, the goal of every sentence is to make the reader want to read the next sentence to see what happens. And you keep doing that long enough, they're going to want to read the whole book.
Yeah, and I think as well on a slightly personal note, because there is also, especially when we're dealing with fantasy here, there is also the thing about sharing a lot about the setting. You mentioned the weather before, but in fantasy especially, it can be like, okay, so they're entering this elven city, and then there is like half a page on why the city looks like this, or why people are behaving like this, and then
the history
200 years ago, that
exactly.
that building over there was demolished, and they have left it demolished as a reminder of how evil the enemies are, or whatever, all that kind of thing. And it is so easy to do when writing fantasy, and because if I had to write my first book today, or the beginning of my first book, I think overall it's a good book, but the beginning of the book does suffer from this. There's too much of setting description in the beginning of it, and of course, again, it was my first book, so you live and you learn, but there was too much setting description, and I have had some people or readers pointing it out and pointing out how also there was too many names in the beginning.
Okay, that's a good point.
So they sort of lost a bit of track on who is important and who am I supposed to root for, basically. That's what they need to know in the beginning. They need to clearly understand, okay, this is the character that I'm supposed to root for. This is apparently the hero or the heroine. And they're doing something, and they're not. I think we need to define action in a bit of a broader context. So action just means that they are proactively doing something. It doesn't mean action in terms of their sword fights or guns being shot or anything like that. if you do it right, or if you do it carefully, it could be something like that. I'm not saying that you cannot never open a book where some sort of fight or war is going on or whatever. You could do that, but it's a bit more difficult. But I think action needs to be defined more broadly as it's just a proactive action taken by the protagonist.
Right. It's almost like a purpose. You have something going on. I mean, if it was your day-to-day life, it is you're searching for your keys. Something is happening, but yeah, it doesn't have to be a chase scene or fleeing from a dragon. It doesn't have to be huge. And I definitely agree. Description from the world, I mean, the world, especially in fantasy, is almost like another character. It is so important. It's as important as the magic. It's just, these are our two pillars of what fantasy really is. It has magic and it has this amazing setting with amazing creatures. But when it comes to just those, especially that first page, you want to pare it down to just almost like writing a flash fiction short story. Just the details to make it interesting, just the details to layer in curiosity that there is more. You get the flavors, the hints that there's a whole world, there's a whole importance of why these things are there. You might mention that there's, I can't mention the tower that had been ruined, so you might mention there's a ruined tower, but not explain why or where it is. You can explain that later. You have 100,000 words to explain what you're setting up in these first few paragraphs. But if you can't get the reader past those first few paragraphs, you won't get the chance to explain it all. So those first ones, to me, I had a poetry writing class, and this is really almost the essence of poetry writing, is you pare it down to just the essence you need to convey what you're trying to get across. And what it should be getting across is who's the main character, a little flavor of the world, something happening, something curious, intriguing, something that's going to make the reader go, what is going on? Without going like, oh my God, there's so much stuff going on, I don't know what's going on, but go, oh, there's something, why are they doing this? What's going on? Why is, what's the story of this? They want to be curious why they're doing things without explaining anything about why they're doing anything, because you can explain later.
Yeah, about the world building as well, it's such a big part of the genre, of course, but I think for a lot of us fantasy writers, we write fantasy because we also love the world building. And hence it becomes very easy to say or to want in the beginning of the book to share some of that, because we feel this need to, well, the reader won't really understand why, this elf hate that dwarf over there, unless I also explain that 200 years ago there was a war between the two races, and well, there might be some truth to that, but the thing is also that, as you just said there, you have an entire book to share those things. So you can go quite easy in the beginning, and then over time seed in, preferably, of course, in action or in dialogue, about what happened. That would be best. But I picked out an example as well, because I think it sort of cements the point that I'm making here.
Mm-hmm.
In the I can't remember exactly if the book is the same thing, but this is at least from the movie, where Gandalf first enters the Shire, and Frodo accuses him of being late. Do you remember what Gandalf replies?
No, shoot, I don't.
Oh, I need to. I should almost try to have like a really good wizard voice here, but I don't know if I can.
Pretty good.
No, that doesn't sound like Gandalf at all, actually. It more sounds like an evil wizard or something. No, but he says, a wizard is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
That's right.
And I think that is so excellent, because within that one line of dialogue, we now know, okay, this guy's a wizard, and he's come to visit for whatever reason. We don't even know why yet, and that's the curiosity part that Autumn was just talking about, right?
Right.
About why is he coming here? What's going to happen? Okay, a wizard. that's pretty cool. As a fantasy reader, but you don't need to do more. Whereas the other part could have been to start saying, well, Frodo was a hobbit, and there was a wizard called Gandalf, and he was really looking forward for Gandalf to arrive later today, blah, 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 blah. Right?
Exactly.
You can already see, now I'm already into info dumping. And then my next impulse could be to try to explain how long ago Gandalf last there, and how he usually brings some fireworks, and, you know, which
you start
great,
explaining,
but it doesn't matter.
No, and you're telling and not showing, and I think that's one of the important things. And also, I think not only that line gives a sense of what kind of wizard Gandalf is, and you get attitude with that, and you want that as well. That is a huge opening hook. If you have a character that is sparks on page 1, where you get this attitude, where you get a sense of who they are, that can be so interesting. You suddenly want to know more about this character and this person, and so that's another great hook. And by paring things down to really like good dialogue, good action, and skipping all the description, and like you were saying, explaining about the hobbits and what they are, and fireworks and wizards, by just ignoring all of that.
What's there not to like?
Oh, it
sounds awesome.
Do it in chapter 5. Don't do it now. Or better yet, don't say wizards always bring fireworks. Have them show them off. You know, you want to definitely keep to the show. Make the characters do things. Don't just sit there and tell the reader about the things that the characters could be doing. That's just, no, don't do that here, especially in the first pages. Keep your passive sentences to a minimum. They should be very good, tight verbs and things that are solid and happening.
Yeah, that's true. And a lot of this stuff that we're talking about here is, of course, also about meeting reader expectations, and by delivering those genre tropes that the reader is expecting to be there. I mean, in the plotting book, we jokingly said, so I just picked out this quote from in there. So it goes like this, quote, "Imagine a restaurant with a large red sign over the entrance reading Chinese restaurant. Mm-hmm. You go inside and find the menu listing spare ribs and hamburgers. With no traditional Chinese dishes on offer, such a restaurant would have a hard time satisfying its customers," end quote.
Yes.
Right?
Very true. And
so that's the same thing here for us. When writing fantasy, we need to deliver those fantasy tropes, because they opened a fantasy book just like we entered a Chinese restaurant, in the hopes that we will find something with magic or fantastical creatures and all those kind of things that we love from the genre. So we need to deliver some of that. But it doesn't mean that we have to start explaining where the dragons came from, and how the dragon that actually exists in these lands are 1,454 years old, and it's actually rather young for the age of a dragon, and so on. So you know, it
no,
in an opening hook, no thanks.
No, it's way too much. And even, I mean, I look at that, we've had a discussion about prologues because of the book we're writing together, and I definitely we've pared it down to that we think a sentence or two is okay, but as soon as you get to a paragraph or two, a prologue is too long. It should be, again, a little spice. I love cooking, and I've been cooking today, sorry. So you're getting all the food analogies. Just a hint of spice, something to get a little bit of seasoning, but you know, you need to keep it going towards the story. You shouldn't be explaining things. I know in the novel beginnings, this is sort of a good thing. If you had an opening line as, "The demon possessing Zeke broke through the door, Caitlin grabbed a handful of blessed myrrh," it's not explaining why Zeke is now possessed by a demon, which demon is possessing him, why will myrrh actually do anything, or who blessed it. It's just things are happening, and that's fine. The rest will be revealed later. Those are the questions that the reader should have, is like, why is Zeke possessed? What's the relationship there? They're just little curiosity things. You kind of want to find out what's gonna happen next without getting buried under all the details of, well, Zeke got in trouble and with school, or was doing an incantation and didn't think it would actually work, and blah, blah, blah. You don't need to know any of that.
Did you just make that up?
That's actually right from the novel. novel beginnings booklet.
Right. Okay.
That's my
cool.
quote.
Right, cool. Yeah, there was somebody talking in the Am Writing Fantasy Facebook group as well around favorite opening lines, and of course now I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something like somebody said that what they liked the most was something along these lines, and I'm gonna butcher it a bit, so sorry about that, but it was something like, it's the 1st of June and somebody has to die today.
Oh yes.
Something like that.
Yes, and I can't think of the book that one's from, but yes,
no,
that is
I can't
very
either,
good one.
But that's a good start, you'll be like, okay, this is interesting.
Yes. And to me, I think we can talk about a good opening and a good hook, but I think if you're writing and you're in your manuscript, do not sit there and go over your chapter 1 again and again and again, trying to get it down to your first perfect hook. Write your manuscript and then come back and then start looking for the gem. I know when I wrote my debut novel, I actually cut 3 chapters. And it took me, I had to write the whole thing out, do some editing, tweak things, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then I started looking at the beginning saying, where is it supposed to begin? And I realized I had 3 chapters of just drivel that I had to write to get it out of my head, and just cut it, and it didn't lose a damn thing, and it actually improved a ton to suddenly just cut out the first bit, the explanation, and start there. And I've read, I've helped other authors, I've read some other things, and I know one, I think it was like the 3rd paragraph in, and it had a great opening line of, I can't even find it now, but it was something like, today Caitlin was going to join the, something, oh shoot, it was something bad too, it was like, traitors or something, and she was going to become a traitor or something. And I was just like, oh, today Caitlin is going to become a traitor. Oh, that's interesting. But it was buried like 3 or 4 paragraphs down. It's like, well, get rid of the other stuff. Start with that. That's exciting. That is like, wow, what's going on? And if you can find that, that's great. And most likely you have it. If you've written your book and you have your manuscript, it's in there. You just have to go and, sort through the hay to find the needle. You'll find it. It's in there. But don't worry about starting your first draft, your manuscript, with the perfect hook. Write first and then come back. And that's part of the editing, is to find out where you put it, because it's in there somewhere.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just want to pick up on that in a second. But before I forget, I just wanted to mention as well that regarding the prologue, I actually in the past recorded a full video where I talk about how to write a killer prologue. So I will also add a link to that video in the show notes. And if anybody is curious about that, then it's on YouTube, so you can go and check it out. So it's an older one, but the points in there are still good. So you can go and watch that one if you want. But yeah, just coming back to what you were saying there. I think that there is a really, really important point around the tendency, and I think most authors actually have the tendency to set the first chapter or the beginning of the book too early rather than too late.
I agree.
We often start with all the build-up. If I do my own example again, with my first book, the first one I wrote there that I mentioned earlier as well, I could actually have made it worse, the beginning, because initially my plan was to start the book. So the character, the protagonist, she's pregnant, and she and her husband-to-be are going to this city that they live quite outside. They're like this, they're kind of elves in a way, but they're not elves, but kind of. But so they live in their own cabin, probably like, I can't remember, I think it's like half a day's walk from the city.
Okay.
In the forest. And they don't quite get along that well with the people in the city, or the protagonist doesn't, so that's why they live out there. But they have to go and visit his parents to tell them about the fact that she's pregnant. And my initial thinking was, because you always hear this advice out there about you should show the character in their everyday life in the beginning. And when I first started out, I thought, oh, okay, so I'll put them in this cabin out there in the woods. They can just be cooking some food or breakfast or something before they have to leave to go to the city. And luckily enough, I caught myself there, and I thought, but how is that interesting? So okay, so I'm going to have an opening chapter with people eating food and saying, okay, are you ready to go? Yeah, I'll get my things. And it's just so boring.
Right. Well, I think yes.
Yeah.
There's definitely a tendency, I agree, that we want to start. Sometimes we need it to get ourselves into the story as authors, but I definitely think it's something that you can go back and cut, because it's got to be at least enough of it's got to be an everyday life thing, but it's also got to be movement and something happening and something that's got to tie to like the inciting incidents and the plot. That's already got to be kind of bubbling up. And like we said, the character has got to be fully fleshed out. Maybe you don't know your character that well. And so, in our character course, we talk about making sure your character is really solid and vivid and fully formed, so that when you start even that first sentence, that attitude, that something comes through that is gripping and really engaging for the reader to say, oh, there's no fuzzy grayness in this character. This character is pretty much solid 3D and colored, and we're good to go.
Yeah, because that's the other part of it. And that's what you're alluding at there as well. You can also start the story too late.
Yes.
So this stuff is really not that easy.
No.
You can start too early, you can start too late. Because if you're starting too late, the problem is that you might be confusing the intro with the inciting incident.
Right.
And that's not the point either.
No.
So you cannot start so late that you're already into the inciting incident, because that sort of skews the entire plot structure of the novel. So that's not going to work either.
No.
So I think that the way we describe it in our plotting book is basically think as the introduction as sort of a mini story on its own.
Yes.
So it's like a bridge that reaches from the first page and towards the inciting incident. So it's this little mini story where something will happen that will then take you towards that inciting incident in an interesting way.
Yes.
That piques the reader's curiosity along the way. And that's really the trick of it, is to make sure that, one, you keep the curiosity going, but also that you have a clear goal in mind. And with the mini story, that gives you that goal. So there's something specific happening there. In just to use that one book again, or my first book there as an example again, because now I already started it, so I might as well keep going. But there, for example, I actually have a sort of a little mini story in there, in that once they get into this city that I mentioned before, they in the city they all live, or they have platforms up in the tree, like quite far above the forest bed. Mm-hmm. And they're having this festival on this point in time when they get there, and the kids running around up there and whatnot. And at some point, a kid actually falls off the platform, and the protagonist then jumps off the platform as well and saves the kid. But she's of course pregnant, so that's not a good thing to do. And they fall all the way down to the ground. And there you see, there is a little mini story there already.
Right. Yes, I always like to say the mini story, the conclusion of the mini story, whatever plot that is basically the inciting incident. Whatever the character is trying to do, in your example, save the kid, it turns out wrong. And that is what basically sparks the inciting incident. So it's all related. It builds into the plot. And mine is, like I mentioned, the main character is sneaking out to see a girl with magic that she had, didn't get a chance to grab earlier, because that's her job as a priestess. She's supposed to collect other potentials to be taken in to the elemental church. And so she just didn't do it early. She froze. She's young. She froze. She didn't do it. So she's trying to rectify her mistake. And that's all. The whole mini story is basically trying to rectify her mistake. But of course, when she gets the girl, it all goes to crap. And that sparks the entire 105,000 word novel, because her mini story goes wrong. And that's a great way of showing the world, showing a full-fledged character, showing a little bit of action without hitting your reader over the head with this plot and this world and all this big stuff that they should care about, but you haven't made them care about it yet. You shouldn't tell them to care about it. You should show them these are characters you're really going to like, and show that in that little mini story. And by the time their curiosity is hooked, the inciting incident happens, and then they just have to know how the character is going to survive this.
Yeah, so writing the opening hook is, it's much harder than it seems.
It's really good.
And it is very often what determines if the reader will dump the book or not. Unfortunately, they will make up their mind within a few pages, and that's it. So we will cover this topic in much more detail on how exactly to build this mini story and what to think about, how to introduce the characters and all of that stuff in much more details in our guidebook on how to plot a novel, when that comes out in probably a few months' time, I would say.
Soon.
Yeah, well, we keep saying that. We'll see. But for now, at least, I hope you got a lot out of today's episode. And next Monday, if all goes according to plan, the women are again taking over the podcast feed, as Autumn has a very awesome guest lined up for you.
If you like what you just heard, there's a few things you can do to support the Am Writing Fantasy Podcast. Please tell a fellow author about the show and visit us at Apple Podcast and leave a rating and review. You can also join Autumn and Jesper on patreon.com/AmWritingFantasy. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get awesome rewards and keep the Am Writing Fantasy Podcast going. Stay safe out there and see you next Monday.